But again, he's going to concede to Tissot, and he scores for Atletico. Well, it took a couple of tries, but Maxime Tissot has finally found the range.
Outside, Musi left boot, oh, a strike! It's magic from Ali Musi, and almost certainly the end of Valour's playoff hopes. Musi, what a strike!
That was the end of Valour's playoff hopes. In fact, the four sides who have been confirmed to be competing for the 2022 North Star Shield have been officially confirmed. That is Cavalry, Pacific, and Forge. They locked up their playoff spots this weekend. They're joining, of course, Atletico Ottawa, who had previously done that in the postseason. Mitchell Tierney here alongside Charlie O'Connor-Clark. No Christian Jack this week, but we do have a good guest to make up for that. Nate Ingham of Atletico Ottawa will join us to talk, soccer in the nation's capital, the potential first to worst story that could be wrapped up this weekend, the regular season title race, and plenty more. But first, let's take a quick look at the weekend that was in the CPL. Pacific, they wasted absolutely no time getting the weekend started, scoring just 27 seconds into a 1-0 victory over FC Edmonton. Marco Bustos scoring a header for his second of the season. On Saturday, then, a doubleheader. Atletico Ottawa, they held on for a 2-1 win over Halifax Wanderers with Max Tissot and Zakaria Bahus scoring. Sam Salter, he had the lone goal for Halifax. He now has 11 on the season, tied with Ozazi de Rosario for second in the Golden Boot. Later that day, Forge, they'd booked their ticket to the 2022 playoffs with a 2-0 victory in the 905 Derby at Tim Hortons Field over York United. Maliko Labi Belou and, of course, Abubakar Sissoko scoring for the Hammers. And finally, Sunday, the match we just saw there at the end of that highlight clip, Cavalry, they eliminated Valour from playoff contention, also clinched a playoff spot for themselves, as well as Pacific in the process. Let me tell you, doing the social media for that was wild, trying to get all those two clinch graphics, like a bunch of stuff up all at once, but a meaningful result. Joe Mason and Ali Musi scoring in that match, while Billy Forbes had the consolation goal for Valour. Charlie, all four are set, and kind of nice that all four won this weekend. I mean, obviously, it wasn't like a win and you're in kind of situation for at least Pacific. But I mean, they at least were all able to enter the playoffs on a winning note.
Yeah, if you're a team clinching a playoff spot, you always want to celebrate that on the back of 3 points, right? You don't want one of those ones where like there's a result elsewhere and you maybe get kind of a disappointing result, a draw or something, but you're still celebrating it in the game because you clinch your playoff spot. All these teams are, it's also good because these four playoff teams are, in theory, going into these playoffs in better form. After a lot of them maybe struggled at the end of August and early September, they're all kind of starting to round into form to play a little bit better, which bodes well for some exciting playoff matches in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, it certainly does, and it bodes well for the last weekend of the season where, of course, the regular season title still on the line, and the three teams who can still do it, Pacific, Forge, and Ottawa, all of them will have reasons. I mean, aside from the, monetary value, obviously playing at home is during the playoffs is massive for any of these clubs.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, we've seen how hard it can be in the CPL to travel. This is a big country. So to go into someone else's stadium, someone else's crowd, which obviously they're playoff games, so we're expecting boisterous atmospheres. Every team wants to have that advantage in those second legs, and absolutely, if you're winning a championship, you would much rather do so on home turf, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's the dream for any of these clubs is for a number of different reasons on and off the field, getting that final at their home stadium. So obviously still a lot to play for, even if, the standings themselves are mostly set in terms of who is making the playoffs. But let's start the weekend off and bring on Benedict Rhodes, who is the correspondent for the final match of this past weekend at Spruce Meadows between Cavalry and Valour. And of course, I think the most impactful result of the weekend, obviously, with the 2-1 win. And we mentioned, what that did for Pacific and Cavalry, as well as eliminating Valour. Benny, your thoughts on obviously a huge match and a big performance from Cavalry?
Yeah, it was a very good performance from Cavalry. You said this game had huge implications. It sealed the fate of three teams, and kind of ended I guess, a run from Valor where they thought maybe they'll sort of pull off the miracle, I guess, and actually get into the playoffs. Started to not look as much of a miracle and look like a real possibility. And I think if you're watching on YouTube, you see this goal right here just after halftime. Valor were good in the first half, but weren't able to find a goal and went down 1-0 on a goal that they would have liked to have prevented. And to sort of tie it up just after halftime, you thought, they still have a chance. They might actually pull this off, but fortunately, it wasn't to be for Valor, and they came close a couple of times, but weren't able to get it done. And Cavalry ended up picking up a pretty huge 3 points.
Yeah, it's kind of exactly the sort of game you want late in the season, right, Benny? When there's a ton on the line for both teams, and other teams are keeping tabs on it because it matters for them, and then it's a close one right to the end. Obviously, Valor fighting for their lives towards the end, and the season, or their season, ends up being doomed by a wonder goal with again a great strike from Musi, but that cross from Roberto Alarcon deserves some credit as well. And then you see at the end of the game when Tommy Wheeldon Jr. just lets out this scream of relief or jubilation, excitement. You can see how much it means to these guys to get into that spot and to be able to compete for that playoff championship, right, Benedict? It was just like a fun way to have these sorts of things decided at the end of the season.
Yeah, especially after last weekend's game, it was Cavalry versus Ottawa. The winner clinches the playoff spot, and Ottawa came in and pretty convincingly, in Calgary and took that spot away from them. So to be able to get a second crack at it, I guess, and do it this time, you heard the stadium was maybe the loudest that stadium's ever been when that game ended. And you mentioned Tommy, and it was kind of just a perfect storm, I guess, for Cavalry, who again also eliminated a team who was right behind them in the table as well.
Yeah, we mentioned ways to clinch playoff spots. I think that was certainly the most exciting way of all the clubs to do it. Obviously, the draw would have been enough, but to score that emphatic goal at the end was awesome. And this is something that you mentioned in your analysis a little bit, Benny, and it's something that we've talked about with Cavalry all season, where we've kind of wondered if they have those difference maker players. Obviously, they're a good side, they're a very deep side, but it's incredibly important then in these matches, especially as we're going into the big playoff matches, that you have those guys you can look to score the big goals you need and be those, game breaking players. And at times this season, it hasn't exactly looked like those players are there for Cavalry. But in this game, we see Joe Mason, who can potentially be one of those guys getting an early goal. Obviously, a bit of a lucky one from him, but he's been in good form recently. And then Ali Musi with an absolute masterclass. How important is it for them that these players are, in such good form right now going into the playoffs?
Yeah, it's crucially important. Like last year in the playoffs, I know they don't like continue mentioning this game a year later, but you have to mention last year's playoff game where they went into a little bit flat maybe, and they ended up getting burned by Pacific in that game. And they're very keen not to make that happen again, and that could potentially be a first round matchup in this playoffs. And having all these guys ready and firing and fit as well. The only players that are really missing are Sergio Camargo and Charlie Trafford will be back in time for the playoffs as well from his suspension. So everyone's kind of back at the right time, and everyone's healthy and playing pretty well. So I think that's exactly what you want to see for Tommy Wheeldon Jr.
Yeah, it certainly is. And just for them to maybe get a little bit back to their identity, right, Benedict? Obviously, this isn't a game where Cavalry has a ton of possession. They sometimes do like to play with the ball, but in this game, they're quite direct, I think, which was entertaining to watch. Like, what exactly do you think was maybe making a difference for them, maybe clicking an attack for them in this game?
Yeah, you said the directness, the sort of no fear, I guess. Sometimes they look maybe a little bit hesitant at times over the last couple of months, but in this game they were just going for it. Jose Escalante is the key of being a sort of direct player. You can kind of just bomb up the wing and make things happen. And Musi was doing that. Mikael Cantave was excellent in this game at doing that, as you saw on the first goal. And they just played without a fear and without any kind of hesitation, which is exactly what you want to do. You want to have it all guns blazing, I guess, going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Cantave, Benny, because I do think that's another player that's been a bit of a difference maker for them and just has that extra bit of quality where he can beat a player or can play that pass through. We saw it on the Musi goal. I think it was at Tim Hortons Field where he plays that chip pass through and Musi scores that incredible goal. And we saw it again here with the cross. This is a player that has that quality, has played in some decent levels in Europe and has brought that to Cavalry, and we're really starting to see him click with others. So that's a player to watch, I think, for Cavalry heading into the postseason here. And, postseason has been on the mind all year for Tommy Wilden Jr. and Cavalry. Let's hear his thoughts after the match.
Well, we set out our goals at the start of the season. We had to get back into playoffs. No matter how you start the race, it's how you finish it that counts. We've topped the table and not picked up any silverware. Although the commissioner's just gone back and given us that, so let's not take away from that. We'll value that. But a playoff championship is a lot, so we just had to finish above the line. We knew that we had 3 bites of the cherry. It didn't work last week, but we knew that we wanted to take this one and not leave it to the last game of the season. Last game of the season is an absolute bonus for where we finish in the table.
Yeah, bonus, and obviously we mentioned that Ali Musi goal that got them there in a big way. Let's hear from the goal scorer himself.
It's just another game to me. I don't really think too much about those things. I have respect for that club. It was my first professional contract, and it's not sweeter. It's just another goal and a very important goal. And we just have a mission that we're on right now, and I don't really think too much about those things. I just think about doing what I have to do on the pitch and making sure that we get the win.
Musi built in a transition there for me. Let's talk about his former club, Valour, who obviously, he helped to end their season. But, this was a side where, Benny, you mentioned, there was a bit there where it really looked like they were going to pull off this Cinderella run into the playoffs. I think the stretch where they beat Pacific and then beat Forge in back-to-back games, and they got above that playoff line. They were starting to build some security above that playoff line, and then just a single point in their next 4 games, some of which that weren't against playoff opposition as well. What went wrong for Valour, do you think, Benny, both in this game and in that stretch? Because obviously, they kind of let it slip themselves.
Yeah, I think like you said there, they kind of let it slip. There's a lot of games this season where they were maybe leading and then dropped points or conceded and weren't able to get quite back into it, which is, the top teams in any league are the teams who can find ways to win and find ways to pick up results, even if they go down. And I think there's one stat floating around where they haven't come from behind to win since 2019, which is a little bit alarming. And I think of the couple games at home as well. Phil mentioned them himself. There's the Pacific game at home where they were leading and dominating Pacific after 70 minutes and then conceded twice in 2 minutes and 5 seconds or something. And there goes 3 points against the team you're directly fighting against in a playoff race. So I think at the time, on one hand, their other teams are playing better, but at the same time, they also maybe haven't been, clutch, I guess, at the right moments they needed to pick up the wins.
It's an interesting one to maybe look at this Valour season kind of as a whole. Obviously, Phil Dos Santos' first year in charge of this team, first full year. They played some really good football at times. They played some entertaining, pressing football, attacking football, and they defended quite well at times as well. But when you look at it as a whole, they probably will be disappointed, right? To maybe see it as a little bit too little, too late with this sort of push towards the playoffs. Benedict, I don't know if you kind of look at this Valour season as a whole, how happy or disappointed do you think they should end up being with this?
I think fairly happy. They're in the conversation again. 27th game out of 28 was the one that got them eliminated. They're in the conversation all year, as they were last year as well. So that's obviously a positive, but at the same time, a negative that they weren't able to take that next step. Like last year, they missed by 1 point, I think it was, and this year they just weren't quite able to find that more consistency, I guess, to get them over the line this time. So I think Phil will be happy and the team will be happy that they were in the conversation all year, but at the same time, that the next step is going to be a much bigger step than it is to go from 6th to 5th, for example.
Yeah, the one concern or one of the concerns I think is, I don't know if Rea or Sirois are going to be back next year, and those are two pretty important players for them because, I think the way both of those players played, especially Rea, I think CF Montreal are going to be pretty keen to see what they look like in their kits next season. So obviously there's 2 potential replacements you have to make. Obviously Rea and Yesley showed well at points this season and could be the built-in replacement there, but I don't really think they have a player like Rea. I don't think many clubs do in the league have a player like Rea, so there's one that they're going to have to work on. But we mentioned, PDS's thoughts and how things kind of went down the stretch for Valour. Let's hear from the Valour coach now.
Not being able to secure points in those away games, that's what hurt us. It's not just one game. I think I think that coming here is already hard enough. Having to come here and fight for your life. I think that it's you're playing with fire, and we've played with fire in the last few games. And today, again, the mentality of the group was fantastic. I think that I never questioned their integrity and their desire to come to places like these and win. And I think that if we had played like we played today with the same commitment and the same passion and the same fight and games that we didn't secure points on the road, we wouldn't be in this position right now.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment of how things went for Valour this season from Phil Dos Santos, as he usually gives us, which we're always appreciative of. Benny, we're always very appreciative of you and the work you do for us, both on camera and behind the scenes. So we'll allow you to take yourself out of the show now, and we'll continue on. Thanks,
I thought
Benny.
you were going to say on and off the pitch.
Oh,
I would have agreed.
I got close to saying that probably, but I'm actually impressed I didn't say that, to be fully honest with you. But yeah, let's talk about the next match over the weekend, and that is Halifax, their final home game of the season, of the 2022 season, taking on the league leaders Atletico Ottawa. And this is actually, I think, the third free kick that Ottawa had from this exact same position, and Maxi, so third time's the charm. He scores an absolute beauty here if you're watching on the webcast. And they skipped it there, but he does the Cristiano Ronaldo situation. I really wanted to yell that into the mic and just absolutely obliterate anyone who's listening to but anyway, yeah, me too, to be honest. But a great goal there. And I think that this was a match, for me at least, where Atletico continued to show some progress as a side. They obviously, they gave away a few chances in the early going, but, their goals didn't really come fully in transition. They were in moments that they built up themselves against, a Halifax side that I think had 4 clean sheets and 6 coming into this match, and are so difficult to break down defensively. They were able to, they knew how difficult to, even without Rampersad in the lineup for Halifax, how difficult it is to break Halifax down through the middle. So they really pushed their play out to the wings, had their guys go close together, built triangles nicely. And it worked out for them well. They obviously have plenty of quality wide players, and then they were able to find some nice combinations in those positions. And again, without Valour Tabla as well, another guy who was missing for them. So an impressive performance, and again, one that I think shows the evolution. And another thing, able to hold on late. We talked about a Valour side that maybe has let some results slip. Ottawa's done largely the opposite for a lot of this year. They've really been able to hold on, even in some difficult circumstances where Halifax really had all kinds of chances late, but some big saves from Nate Ingham, some good last ditch efforts, and they get the 3 points.
Yeah, they did, and they deserved them, as they often have this year. And there's obviously a reason that they're in pole position for that regular season title. And also the other thing we get to stop talking about soon is that they are very close to hitting their under 21 minutes. They need like 26 or 27 this Sunday against York, which shouldn't be a problem, especially with how well Zachariah Bahus has been playing and played in this game, scoring obviously a goal and well deserving of that. But yeah, I think it was important that you mentioned the way that they look to play in the wide areas and maybe break down a quite defensive at times Halifax team. Miguel Acosta, one of the best kind of right center back, right fullbacks in the whole CPL, and on both sides of the ball, and the cross he sends in for that goal is exceptional. There's not a lot of players in this league that can make a play like that, right? But this Ottawa team, they do continuously, they just are very consistent, right? They rarely get run over. If the other team has the ball, it's often because they want them to. Sometimes they are fine or happy to, at least in phases or stretches of a game, they can maybe absorb some pressure and look for a counterattack. That's a little easier when you've got Valour Tabla in the game, obviously. But in general, I think there's a lot to like about this Ottawa team, who seem set up quite well for those playoff matches where the margins are going to be very tight and, mistakes can be punished very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Bahus, because, he's the kind of player and the example of why this rule exists, because
Yeah.
if he doesn't get the minutes that he's had this season, I don't think he's developed at a significant rate this season. But at the start of the year he was good. He was a solid player, but very raw. And I think we've seen a player that's really developed before our eyes. And in the last couple of matches, he's had some exceptional moments. I think of him scything through Cavalry and almost scoring. Obviously, Valour scored probably the goal of the season earlier in that game, but he would have had a candidate as well. Shortly thereafter, scores in this game, has had some really nice assists as well. I think his close touch has been a lot better. So, it's a great example of why this rule exists. Zach Waugh as well, has been put into the lineup probably because of this rule over the last little bit. And we've seen some great development from him as well. He was excellent in this match and was one of those players who was able to really combine well with Acosta and Ollie Bassett out on that right side and cause all sorts of issues for Halifax out there. So again, this rule is for a reason, and I think that Bahus is a great example of why.
Yeah, I agree, and I think this has kind of been calculated over the season by Carlos Gonzalez to slowly work, especially Bahus, to slowly work him into this lineup, because obviously they're a team that has been trying to establish a tactical identity and a very, very thorough sort of philosophy in the way that they play. And with a younger player like Bahus, who maybe hasn't been in a lot of these kinds of professional environments, it's going to take him longer to get up to speed and to get to a place where Gonzalez is comfortable putting him into that lineup in games that they're trying to win, obviously. So it seems like, as the weeks and months have progressed, he's given him a little bit more leash, he's given him more opportunities, and now he's certainly a player that you're comfortable putting into a lineup on this side, whether you want to say that you had to put him in or not. He's a player that obviously Gonzalez does trust now, because we've seen his evolution, we've seen how much better he is, and how he is able to be a part of that tactical identity. That's obviously a huge part of why they are where they are this season.
Yeah, great points. And a lot of points for Atletico Ottawa this season, especially on the road. That was a tough transition, but we'll take it.
I'll give you that one. Okay.
They broke the league record for most points in or on the road in a regular season this past year with 28 points. 8 wins, which also ties the league record. Cavalry had both of those records previously. They did that in both 2019 and 2021. So a great year for Atletico Ottawa. And let's hear from Carlos Gonzalez on his thoughts on doing that.
We are having moments in which we are suffering, or maybe we are not in our best version, but still the team is competing so good, and we are able to continue winning the 3 points. I think that the season that the guys are doing, the team is doing, is remarkable. I'm very proud of the competitiveness of that we've created, and the mentality that all the players have. They show every single game, every single action, that they are ambitious and that they're still hungry.
Yeah, and on the Halifax side of things, in some ways the exact opposite. Whereas Ottawa's been excellent on the road this season, Halifax has really struggled at home, or had really struggled at home. Obviously, they're done their home part of the season now. I think it's 6 losses this year, which is tied for the league worst with York United and FC Edmonton at home, which is more than they had in their entire history before this. It was 4 coming into this season. Charlie, that's got to be one of the things that they fix, almost immediately, because they do have that advantage of playing such a difficult travel date, because you have to get out to Halifax. It's an excellent pitch where they have one of, if not the best crowd in the league. It really, if you're trying to build an identity with the Halifax side, it has to start, you'd think, at the Wanderers ground.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they'll be the first ones to say that it's been really disappointing for them at home this year, right? Especially the last few years. I think back to 2019 when they were almost unbeatable at home. I think only Forge might have been the ones who were able to beat them at Wanderers grounds in that season. But this year just hasn't been there. There's been a lot of things missing with this club. Kind of that quality in the final third hasn't been there this year. But in general, they've been conceding a little softly at times at home this year. They've been allowing some late goals. They haven't started particularly well in a lot of games. So there's been maybe minor mistakes that have cost them a lot of points on that pitch this season, which is historically uncharacteristic of this club, but certainly something that organization isn't going to be happy with, and that you're right, it's going to be one of the first things that they talk about. One of the main themes of this offseason for them is making sure that they can turn that stadium back into the fortress that it once was.
Yeah, and one of the reasons they were unable to pick up any points during the match this weekend, our guest this week, and let's hear from Stephen Hart on his thoughts on how Nate Ingham denied his side.
I was a little disappointed in how we conceded the first goal because Tissot served one in with the first free kick he hit, and we should have been better prepared for that. But, overall, I thought the second half response was positive. We created a number of chances, and, you have to congratulate Ingham. He was fantastic in goal for them. It could have been easy to let us back into the game, but he was outstanding, and that's what you need to win matches, and he certainly did it for them.
Let's bring on the Atletico Ottawa goalkeeper, Nate Ingham, joining the show now. How are you doing, Nate?
Good. Doing well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on. And obviously, one final game this season against York United, and you guys could do it. You could go full worst to first this season. What does that mean to you, and just the incredible story you guys have been writing up there in the nation's capital?
Yeah, it's fantastic. First, that's the first time I just saw that quote from Hardy, and I was just want to say thanks to him. I got a lot of respect for him. I think he's a great coach. That was cool to hear. First to worst, yeah. That's fantastic.
Other way around.
That's right. No, it's going to be good. We've had a lot of success this year. It's been a grind, a lot of our games we've had to earn. We haven't walked into a place and dominated, and had a day where the back line and myself have been able to play stress-free football, but that's the professional game. Those don't come around really. But there's one game left, and we just got to get the job done against York. So still ways to go.
Yeah, you mentioned that back line, Nate, and just the work that this team has done, maybe especially on the training pitch, to be so defensively sound this year, to be so organized, especially some of those defenders you're playing behind, Espejo, Drew Becky, Miguel Acosta. What's it like for you as a goalkeeper with those guys in front of you, just doing such a good job of making sure that you're able to do your job?
Yeah, they've been great. One of our pillars from the beginning of the year, beginning of preseason, was talking about how the strikers are who start our defensive work, and I'm who starts the attack. So it's just like it's a full team effort. It really is. And if you watch us play at all, that it's 11 guys defending. So yeah, I've been talking very highly of Diego and the boys in the past. I think a huge compliments have to go to Drew and Miguel playing on those the outsides of the three in the back. It is a more difficult job. They're covering more ground. They're asked to do a bit more with their feet, and then that's been able to leave Diego in the middle and win balls in the air and kind of do his job. So we haven't put too much workload on the middle of the park, and everyone's kind of helping each other out. It's a fully bought in group, and I think it's obvious from our results and where we're at in the table. You can't get there unless you're a cohesive group.
Another part of that group, and something that Stephen Hart also mentioned after the match, and I think you yourself, Nate, have mentioned this on a few times, is, there's a lot of ink that's been spilled about maybe some of the flashier players that have come in this offseason, your Ollie Bassett's, your Baloo Tablas, but Ottawa also brought in a lot of experienced kind of Canadian players, and that's sort of been a core of the side between yourself. You got Max Tissot there, you got Drew, among others. How important has that been, you guys who know, not only the North American game, but the league as well?
Yeah, it's literally the most important thing. I've preached about it all year long. McKendry and Haworth are two other guys, and even Baloo, like you talk about him being a flashy guy, and I know he's still young, but he's an experienced Canadian guy, right? He's got national team caps. He's been across the pond. He came back, was in MLS. Like, we have a lot of guys that played MLS games, who played important USL and NASL games and have won championships and been to playoffs. And these are the type of things that allow you to win these tight games. And listen, our last 5 games have been in 5 different time zones. We've been on the road a ton. You can't even grab groceries midweek because you're back on the road. No one knows how to handle that unless you've done it. And we've got a lot of guys who have done it. And our travel in the NASL, like I was playing for Edmonton in 2016, 17, 18, I believe. Somewhere in there, and you're doing road trips from Edmonton to Puerto Rico or Edmonton to Miami or San Francisco or wherever. You can't replicate that travel. It's a nightmare. And we went from Pacific back and Calgary back. And then, it's just, you want experience doing those trips because those young boys, they get a little cranky when they don't get their sleep. And tension starts to get the better of people. But we stuck together through this whole thing and went undefeated all the way through it and picked up some big W's away. That's speaking to the experience.
Yeah, it certainly does. There's a lot of love in the chat here from some Atletico Ottawa fans for the team and for yourself as well, Nate.
Good people, the fans, eh?
They absolutely are. I'll take a question here from Arthur, who's asking if you can talk maybe a bit about the mentality of this team, because you guys have suffered some bigger defeats this year, the 6-1, the 4-0, but you've always kind of managed to bounce back and you're at the top of the table for a reason. So can you maybe speak a little bit about what that culture you guys have established is like?
Yeah, I mean, Mourinho's got this great quote, I'd rather lose 4-0 than 4 games 1-0. At the end of the day, it's 3 points. Like it's obviously different, losing 6-1 and losing 1-0 in a tight game. Like they're different, but the reality is you got 0 points and you had the possibility of getting 3 points. You can look at it either way. And if you get all sad about it and you can let it snowball into something bigger than it is, it's a huge mistake, right? As a goalkeeper, something you have to be able to do is forget about things quickly, whether it's a mistake in the 10th minute or if it's a bad loss, And then you look around, and when we were in Spain, Barca beat Madrid 5-1 or something. And I think the day we lost 6-1 to Valour, I came home and TFC in New York were playing. And it was like a 5-4 or something ridiculous. And Sean Johnson, like a top goalkeeper in MLS, you're just like, he let in 5, I let in 6, it happens. Craig Forrest actually reached out to me, and said, keep your head up. It's not 9, don't worry. Like,
oh yeah. Craig's like, you got some work to do.
Well, I made a joke to my former coach. Jimmy reached out to me and was like, hey, keep your head up, keep blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was just trying to beat Craig's record. And then sure enough, the next day, Forrest sent me a message and goes, hey, buddy, watch it. So it is what it is. And you have experienced guys. And this is one of my favorite parts of, maybe this will speak to or answer the question a bit better. It was miserable, right? You go home and you feel sorry for yourself for a bit. And we come back the next morning and we know we're going to get an earful from our coach. And we're kind of saying good morning. And Sissoko, who's had a unbelievable career, sits in the locker room, and everyone's good morning, handshake. And Ciso and I look at each other, and we just start laughing. We're like, what happened yesterday? And that's all you can do. You go, geez, back to the drawing board, and that's how we handle things. Like, everything. And if you look at that Valour game, everything they hit went in. Levi's good player in on his right foot, his non-dominant foot, whips one in the top bins post in. You're like, are you kidding me? That's how the day went. That's football. So you can't dwell on it too much. And if you play that game again, it's never 6-1 again. It's just, you can't take it too seriously. You just got to move on. And again, that experience in the locker room, you just got to grow up and move on.
And obviously, another big change this year, the appointment of Carlos Gonzalez. What has it been about him as a coach that has really helped transition this side into what it is at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a number of times. From the top, from Fernando putting the staff in place and bringing in the players, and then what Carlos has done with that group. It's been incredible. I signed on a 2-year deal. I think most of the guys that came in signed on either a 2+1 or 2 and whatever 3-year deal. So it was always going to be a 2-year, 3-year project. But the thing with us was it was never our goal wasn't to win the league in 2 years. Our goal was to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in Canada in 2 to 3 years. So when you have goals that high, and then in your first year, you have the ability to win the league, if that makes sense. So it was never like, our goal isn't just, okay, we're going to come in, we're going to try and win the league. Like, no, our goal is to win the league, win the playoffs, go to Champions League, win the Can Champ. Like, we have these massive goals. And when I spoke to Fernando, that we both agreed, like, this is what the team's trying to do. I want to be a part of that. Great. And I know for sure when he brought in Carlos, those were the same conversations they were having. And again, I've said this a number of times, but the amount of work Carlos and his staff put in, like, they demand a lot from us tactically, mentally, physically. But he leads by example. He does more work than any of us. And I don't know how much he sleeps, but I don't know if it's enough. I think he's going to have, hopefully we can get the job done and he can enjoy the off season, take a week or two before he gets back to it. But I know him, he will probably not take the time off.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll all like to do that in the off season. But before we can get there, obviously you guys, as you mentioned right there, have a lot of ambition over these next few weeks. You have a chance to win the regular season title on Sunday, and then you go right into the playoffs, and you're obviously hoping to lift a trophy on home turf in Ottawa in the final, right? What would it mean to you guys to be able to do that, to be able to, win trophies for Ottawa, do so at home, and to, complete that, or at least complete a step towards that ambition that you were just talking about there?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean,
Nice.
In the huddle before our last match, for the fans. No, in the huddle before our last match, I told the boys every single team would kill to be in our situation right now. We're away to Halifax, who had just been knocked out of playoffs, and we're home to York. And these other boys have to go play each other, and they're on the road. And Forge and Pacific both had 3 games left. They had to win out. We'd done the work early enough to put ourselves in a very good position. And then we did it again against Halifax to put ourselves in the best. Again, everyone in the league is envious of where we are right now because we have to go home and win one more game. And no matter what anyone else does, we've won the league. So I think we owe it to ourselves, is what I've said to the group, and everyone agrees. We owe it to ourselves to see it out. We put in too much work in preseason and through this year to not finish the job at this point. And then it'll be a hard reset after that game and, reestablish the mindset for playoffs. But it really has to be that one at a time thing and not worry about, where we're heading and who we're playing and who we'd rather play. And everyone's got their own opinion on that and blah, blah, blah. So throw all that out the window. Home this weekend in front of the best fans in the league, get the job done. And we get our first bit of silverware in the CPL for Ottawa. And we get to share that with the fans. That would be very, very special. And, it's why we play the game, like, for these exact moments. So, I'm hoping to enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah, well, Nate, we've really enjoyed having you on the show this week. A massive thank you for joining us. And, best of luck with the rest of the season.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. And hopefully we talk again after the season and we're all in a good mood.
I'll see you on Sunday.
Yes, sir. All right. Take care, guys.
You trying to make drink plans with Nate there?
No, they got a game to play, man.
Okay. Well, speaking of games being played, obviously, Forge, they wanted some serious revenge, I think, for the way things happened the last time York United came to their home stadium in the 905 Derby. Obviously with Mo Babuli coming in and scoring, he wasn't available this time, and Forge, they're able to book their ticket to the 2022 Canadian Premier League playoffs on their own terms with a 2-0 victory. Charlie, you were there. Your thoughts on this match?
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange one. Again, obviously, as you mentioned, very important to Forge to avenge that loss last time York came to Tim Hortons Field. I think that was, as most of them would say, that was probably the worst game that they've played in a CPL this year. Bobby Smirniotis was very, very angry about their performance in that one. And in this game, it wasn't always, a dominant performance. I think the first half, I probably would have thought York were the better team. I think they had a little more of the ball. They were pressing them back a little bit. Forge kind of had to soak up some pressure for a while, but they did so very well. They still didn't really give up a lot of high quality or super dangerous chances. So they were fairly comfortable being able to withstand that pressure. And then in the second half, they made a few tactical adjustments. I think Bobby had Tristan Borges kind of playing in that sort of right half space at times, and sometimes trying to either split between Isaiah Johnston or Jordan Wilson, or sometimes trying to drag them apart and find other spaces and create for the teammates. And Forge just were much improved in that second half, but then both of their goals come from set pieces that York didn't necessarily defend very well. As the first one is they're kind of pulled out of position with the short corner routine, and the second one is just a clearance that Luis Laurie Latanzio is definitely going to want back, because it sets up very nicely for Abubakar Sissoko to wrap his foot around it and score with a very good strike, obviously. But again, Forge also rounding into better form as they head into the playoffs. They had some tough moments, so for them to have a clean sheet, score 2 goals at home, and again win a game that they really, really needed to erase the sort of sour taste of that last time York was there, I think is all very important to them heading into those playoffs.
Yeah, getting goals from different places as well, including Malik Owolabi Bellew, who scored his first ever professional goal. Let's hear from him now.
It's been a while since I've been with the squad, so going into the game I was a little bit nervous. Spoke to my mum back home, and she was saying, imagine the feeling of scoring a goal and how that makes you feel, and like use that to like motivate you in the game. And as cliched as it is, a goal came, so it was just like a great feeling. It was kind of like a full circle moment, I could say. But yeah, again, it's the first of many. I've been planning this in my head for a while, so when I got that opportunity and it finally settled in, I knew that, okay, yeah, this is the celebration I wanted to do.
Yeah, obviously a player who's been with them for a short amount of time, but this year one of the themes has been, those longer serving players, your Alex Ashnode Janssen, Kyle Becker. Now we got to go down the list, darn it. Dom Samuel, Tristan Henry, and then this weekend was David Chouanier. I didn't miss anyone in there, did I?
I wasn't listening, to be honest.
Okay,
but
yeah, I mean that's probably been this whole show.
I think you were right.
Yeah, and then Taron Campbell could do so this weekend, obviously, or tomorrow, yes, on Wednesday against his former side Pacific. Obviously, maybe not quite the same for him because he hasn't spent his entire time with the club the way all of the other aforementioned guys, unless I missed one of them, have. But yeah, after the match, Bobby Smirniotis had some great things to say about these players and just how impactful they've been on this Forge side.
With all of these guys, just tremendous. We're coming to the end of 4 years, and this means that these guys have been here for 4 years, battling for this club. They've been through everything. Through winning championships, through being in difficult situations, in playing in CONCACAF away from home, in pandemics. Qualifying for Champions League, losing in a final, losing a heartbreaker in the Dominican Republic that I think made us better. But if you look at what these guys have done, who I guess are part of this 100-game club, they've been here right from the beginning, and they've seen all the ups and the downs and a lot more ups. And these are the guys we lean on for all of these situations that we're coming forward to. So it's another great achievement. David's been a fantastic player for us, not only in league play, but in CONCACAF and all CONCACAF competitions. He's been an absolute gem playing there, and he's a very important player for us. You see his contributions today and his work on that right wing. He's been fantastic, and whether it's here or it keeps on going, I hope he has another 100 in front of him.
Yeah, some great words, obviously, on some players who have not just had a big impact for Forge, but for the league as well. What?
Some great words. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. No, you're right.
Yeah. There were some words said.
Better ones than yours.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know to take this flack from you. Yeah, obviously on the other side of things, York United missing kind of the player who's been pretty central to their turnaround this, over the past month, and the player who today was named as the Canadian Premier League's Player of the Month for September, that being Mo Babouli. An excellent month, 4 goals, 2 assists, and like we said, he just really kind of transformed York United the second he stepped on the field from them. So let's take a look at Mo's best moments of the past past few months.
Does he need some help? He does. It comes from Babouli. Mo Babouli in the 34th minute. That's what Mo Babouli can do.
This is Verhoeven, who was back with Pacific in 2019. His cross for Babouli. Brilliant header. Just steps away from the post to open the scoring. And Mo has now 3 goals for York United in just his 4th start for the club. Kyle, the Gatorade Player of the Week, well, he is picking up where he left off.
And doing the double in York, Martin Nash also picking up the Manager of the Month. And I think interesting that 6 different managers have picked up Manager of the Month. I think just kind of shows, in an 8-team league, that kind of shows just how much parity there is and just how many ups and downs there have been for multiple sides this year.
Yeah, it does. And that wasn't on purpose. It's not like we set out to give it to as many different people as possible. It's just genuinely been the case that each 7 teams have had at least a moment in the season where they were playing some very good football, and certainly we're in that conversation and we're looking good. And obviously Babouli as well, unbelievable player. His absence on Saturday against Forge was probably a big part of the reason they lost and couldn't score in that first half. We're still not sure if he's going to be able to play this weekend in Ottawa. It might be close, but we'll keep our fingers crossed. But anyway, deserving for the 2 York men, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we mentioned, some real ups and downs for clubs this season, and one of the clubs that have certainly gone through that is Pacific FC. And let's bring on our man out west, or our man on the streets, it sounds like, Alex Ruzik, joining us on location, it looks like, here to talk about Pacific FC. And obviously a big match for them. They were looking to sew up their playoff spot. They obviously couldn't do it with a win. They needed the help from Cavalry, but wanted to put themselves in that position, and can't ask for a better start in this match, can you, AGR?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Pacific been in good form as of late, as we've seen, racked up a couple of victories. So them to come out strong, Edmonton, it was kind of frustrating from Edmonton's standpoint. So you had to talk to them in the week. Alan Koch was like, Pacific's going to come out strong. It's their last home game. Obviously, we saw the news of Jamar Dixon's retirement, so it was a bit of a special moment there. Also, it was a National Truth and Reconciliation Day, a very powerful ceremony beforehand as well. Kind of gave a boost to the crowd, to the team. So they came flying out of the gates. Marco Bustos gets on the end of a header, nods it home. Doesn't get much better than that in front of the home fans. And then from there, Pacific did what they needed to. It wasn't pretty, but they managed to kill out the game. The rest of the 90, Edmonton barely had a sniff. Pacific didn't, but when you're up 1-0 at home, that's all you need. And in the end, that was enough for them to get in the playoffs, which it was hairy for a few weeks there. But when the going got tough, Pacific stepped up, showing why they kind of have that championship caliber. And of course, the return of Manny Aparicio, who plays a central figure in that first goal, can also not be understated.
Yeah, that's a kind of goal that Pacific have often scored with Manny Aparicio on the pitch. Maybe not necessarily headers from Marco Bustos usually, but that when he's often the creator. I think that the players that have been scoring for Pacific in the last 2 games, especially obviously Bustos here and Josh Hurd and Gennaro Daniels in Halifax, is very, very good news for them, because they're still not blowing teams away in attack as they maybe did earlier in the season, but for them to be able to get those top attacking players that they have with a little confidence under the belts and have them maybe break some scoring droughts and get this attack woken up, so to speak, that has to be good news for them, right, Alex? If you're still there or have gone
yes, 100%.
Dark somewhere.
Sorry, cut out there for a second. Connection isn't the best. Was actually at a great Footies Talks event tonight, hence my location. But no, in terms of Pacific's attack, it's good to see guys finding form. Gennaro Daniels is a big one just because he's kind of been tipped to be the guy to replace Alejandro Diaz up front as a number 9. Hasn't maybe always taken his chances, but there today, recently, he took some, that comment is a good one, by the way. But I'm not shady at dealing stickers, but maybe, never know. But yes, Daniels, just see him find his form. It's huge for Pacific, as well as Marco Bustos, because he's been good. He's had flashes, but goals have been hard to come by. In his best seasons, he's typically always, been in and around the goals. And I think if you're heading in the playoffs, you see you've got an in-form Manny Aparicio, you've got an in-form Marco Bustos. Those are the 2 key pieces there. And then, Josh Hurd's going to chip in with some plucky contributions. And if Gennaro Daniels is scoring on top of that, that's perfect.
Yeah, this is a CPL after dark show, and we got AGR in the dark here, it looks like. But at any rate, another thing that has been excellent for Pacific, and obviously is big for them heading into the playoffs, is back-to-back clean sheets. I think for the first time this season. Obviously, how important is that, and what have been the keys to this defensive improvement, because that's really been one of the issues for them all year. They've had moments where they've scored, they have some good offensive players, but they've also conceded at a pretty alarming rate for a side that is in the top 4. So what has it been recently that's helped them out?
Well, it's been over a while now, really. I think since they started the CONCACAF League run over CPL play, they've allowed something like 9 goals in their last 14 games. So it's been building for a while, this sort of defensive strength. And it just, it's obviously it starts with the team, a buy-in approach. It's something James Marin preaches, getting players all over the pitch to be involved defensively. And then also just familiarity. Toma Meojiger really stepping up. Amir Didic, they're really forming a good partnership. After it took a while to maybe get used to not having Lucas McNaughton around, given that he was just such an everyman and he'd often clean up messes that would be created. Now Amir Didic and Toma Meojiger are really settled. The fullbacks alongside them are being settled. And it has done well, because then they've made things really solid for Callum Irving in front of him. And Callum Irving's a good goalkeeper. So when he's got a settled defense in front of him, it kind of leads to this recipe where they've been on a really good defensive run. And I think that bodes well if you're looking at teams that will do well in the playoffs. Last year, Pacific got the title with, a pair of tight wins where defense really won them that. And I think that's the sort of key that you want, because, it's cliche to say that goals will dry up in the playoffs, because there always will be a team that scores goals, but teams that defend well tend to do better in the playoffs. And I think that's great news if you're Pacific, to see how much they've grown in that regard.
Yeah, and Pacific are also going to get a playoff home game, which they haven't before. So that is pretty important. We don't know what it will look like, but obviously they'll get at least one. So that is exciting, and we've seen some big matches at Starlight Stadium and the boost that crowd gives them. So let's hear from James Merriman on what it meant for them this weekend.
Our support here and our fans, they give us an extra lift. They're our 12th man, and it continues to grow. You can hear them. They're getting louder and louder with our team. At times where we're low, they pick us up, and we love playing here, and we have great support, and we want to continue to grow that and grow that relationship. And the way that everybody showed up today as well for the Orange Shirt Day, and to honor that was, it was a really incredible night.
Yeah, no, maybe more of a frustrating night if you're FC Edmonton. What did you make of their performance? And obviously, like you said, a match where they really weren't able to get anything going offensively.
Yeah, that was a surprising thing, because Edmonton recently have found some good form offensively. They've kind of, settled in their patterns. We'd seen some improvements from CJ Smith. Obviously, Mamadi Kamara has been very solid ever since being put in the number 9. What Gabe Bitar has been doing from deeper positions, etc. But yeah, the offense really dried up, which was a bit, again, credit has to be given to Pacific, who are so solid defensively, hardly gave them any chances. But I guess on the flip side, what was nice was that Edmonton was so solid defensively, which again, when it's a young group, you're on the road, you go down 1 goal to a Pacific team that tends to kind of catch fire with a bunch of early goals, to go and keep it 1-0. I thought that was very good defensively from Edmonton on the flip side. So it's kind of frustrating, because it feels like in a lot of recent games, they found the offense, but maybe at cost of the defense. They've had some high goal thrillers, or they, had some very entertaining slugfests, say, like the one against Forge, where despite being 1-1, it was really back and forth. And this game, they defended so well, but that early goal kind of sunk them because they couldn't really get anything going going forward in terms of their movement, in terms of their shots, in terms of their execution. It just all looked a bit off.
Well, let's hear from FC Edmonton head coach Alan Koch and his thoughts on the match.
Very frustrated, to be honest. Our team's incredibly frustrated. We knew Pacific would come flying out of the gates. It was a big game, big occasion. You knew they were going to be energized after the game they won the other day and with their fans behind them tonight. And we knew it, and we didn't respond in a positive way. So incredibly frustrating game in terms of not managing that moment well, and then lots of other moments that didn't go our way, and there was an accumulation of them, unfortunately, and we leave here tonight very, very frustrated.
Well, AGR, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you go, and enjoy the last week of the Canadian Premier League.
Pleasure as always, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome. And yeah, speaking of the last week, one more week of the regular season to get your predictions in on the CPL Predictor app. So let's take a look at the schedule now. We'll start here with a Wednesday matchup in the Canadian Premier League, and a very, very big one. That being Forge FC versus Pacific. Obviously, a game that could loom large in the regular season title race, a game that will loom large regardless in the final standings of the top four. Charlie, your thoughts on this game, and one that obviously will have Pacific looking for revenge after a pretty handily, a pretty big loss last time they're there.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to be at this one at Tim Hortons Field. Last time Pacific went there, Forge were pretty dominant, kind of beat them up a little bit in that game, and Pacific were very, very frustrated after it. I think I'm excited to see two teams kind of going head to head, playing some just out and out attacking football against one another, which is always fun. And I'm just interested to see how which players for these teams are stepping up at this point in the season very late. As we've mentioned before, both these teams still technically alive for first place, and although that will maybe require some help from Atletico Ottawa, both these teams can still get themselves into second place, which would be similarly helpful in the playoffs to be able to host that second leg of the semifinal, and then possibly a final if whoever's in first doesn't win their semi. So there is a lot on the line still in this game for both teams.
Yeah, a lot on the line that game, and a lot on the line the weekend as well, as we have a pair of awesome double headers. Valour there at FC Edmonton on Saturday, and then another big game for Pacific. They're really going to be battle tested heading into the playoffs as they head to Spruce Meadows to take on Cavalry, and then on Sunday, Halifax, they are in Hamilton to take on Forge, and then the season finale, as we talked about throughout the show, that being Atletico Ottawa hosting York United. If Atletico Ottawa win, they are your regular season champions. And let's look at the standings then, as things are right now in the Canadian Premier League. And the top four, bottom four, they're decided, but there's still a lot to play for, as we've said, Charlie. And one note that isn't mentioned in this standings is that wins is the tiebreaker if two sides end tied on points. But at this point, I think everyone is tied on wins anyway. So ultimately, it does look like it will come down to goal difference.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, Forge and Pacific do have an extra game in here. Forge are on 13 wins as are Atletico Ottawa. So if Forge do, get up to 14, 15 wins, and they might be in good shape. But otherwise, yeah, Forge's goal differential is pretty crazy and says a lot about some of the games they've been able to win this year, I think.
Yeah, it certainly does. And as we said, a lot to play for in this final week of the Canadian Premier League, as much as, you would have sort of hoped from a neutral standpoint that there'd be playoff implications on the line. It's still going to be a fun weekend. And I think there's still a lot to learn about all of these sides. And like you said, which kind of players are stepping up this kind of year, a number of other things. So I'm very excited, certainly, for the finale weekend in the Canadian Premier League. I had a tough time getting that word out. I think that might be a sign that we should wrap up the show.
Yeah,
here,
I think so.
Yeah, we stopped being able to say words at some point along the way here. But a huge thank you to Nate Ingham for joining us tonight. Thank you to Alex Gonge-Ruzic as well. Benedict Rhodes, of course, for all he does behind the scenes. Yourself, Charlie, the whole newsroom team. I've been Mitchell Tierney. Thank you so much for watching, listening, interacting. We had some great questions for Nate. Not all of them we could read on the show, but some were funny that we definitely were chuckling at. And yeah, like we said, one final week left in the 2022 Canadian Premier League. So as always, head over to canpl.ca for all of your coverage. But before we go, still time to vote on the Canadian Premier League's goal of the month for September. So head over to our Twitter page and do that. We'll leave you now with the nominees.
Bustos leaves, so Didic goes again, and it's in! Amir Didic from the set piece! Second time's the charm as that strike takes a deflection off the wall and does beat Nate Ingham.
The man most likely to will swing this in from the right-hand side. It's a good one. Oh, it's fantastic. It's absolutely magnificent. It's Hollywood. And my goodness, is he box office or what? And suddenly you can hear a pin drop inside IG Field. Sarr. Gutierrez against the company. Sarr left footed this time. Oh my goodness, he's done it again. Christian Sarr, he doesn't score tap-ins. He scores spectacular goals from way out wide. Christian Sarr has given York United the lead.
Although to be fair, the Cav supporters, they did a great job making the 3-hour trek to the provincial capital to see the final on Fox of the season. Look at this from Ottawa! Are you kidding me, Baloo Tabla?
What a finish that was.